Good evening from Vietnam. Good morning to you, Brian. Thanks a lot for spending your morning joining our show and share your wisdom with our audience around the world. And on behalf of the listeners, thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I always enjoy speaking with you.
Thank you very much. And me too. Congratulations on your first grandchild, Emma James, and we wish him all the best in life. Okay?
Thank you. It's been wonderful. It's one of those things you have to experience to fully understand it. You hear people talk about it, but once you experience it, you're like, oh, I get it now. It's amazing.
Oh yeah. This topic we talk about today is wisdom. And before we recording this conversation, you talk about happiness and joy, and I think that is very powerful piece of wisdom right there. And I don't wanna miss that piece, so I wanna ask you about that. In your opinion, please share with us.
Okay. Well, I think we often think we mean the same thing when we use words that aren't the same. I mean, people interchangeably talk about happiness and joy, and there is a difference. And sometimes it's hard to maybe define exactly what that is, because we talk about happiness being joy or joy being happiness. But I had the best picture of the difference between happiness and joy recently. In February, my wife and I were down in Florida visiting my stepmom, and my wife's a big time golfer. She loves the game. She's really good, but she had never had a hole-in-one. And she finally got one. And she was so happy. I mean, she videoed walking up to the hole, and you could tell the nervousness in her voice, the high pitch, her movements and everything. And when she leaned down and saw the ball in the hole, she was so happy. And then when our grandson, Emmett, was born, and the look on her face when she would sit there and hold him was pure joy. It just conveyed, I could sit here forever and be content just holding him. And so for me, that is now my definition of the difference between happiness and joy. They're both wonderful things to experience, but I think with the joy, there is a peace and contentment that says nothing else matters. And it was really, really cool to finally have a good picture of that.
So how can we help people to have more joy in life, or having that stage of joyful in life a little longer?
Well, you can all have grandkids. Joy, I think, though, is a peace and contentment with the situation that you are in, regardless of circumstances. We may not always be in situations that we would prefer to be in, but if we can find peace and contentment, I think we can have joy. And so while happiness kind of comes and goes, and quite a bit is based on circumstance, I think joy is outside of circumstance. And when you can lay hold of that peace and contentment to know that maybe there's something bigger or beyond that is far more important than what you might be going through, you can maintain a sense of joy. So I think joy can be much more constant than happiness. You know, happiness, as I said, it comes and goes. Sadness, it comes and goes. And quite often that's based on circumstance.
Wow, wow, wow. I just realized, because of my excitement, I forgot to do a proper introduction, Brian. So in our culture, it's very honored for our audience to have you share a little bit about who you are and the work you are doing. Would you please do that honor for us?
Sure, absolutely. So I spent the entirety of my career in the insurance industry here in the United States. Immediately upon graduating, got into the insurance industry and was there for over 30 years. I left a little over 6 years ago to form my own company called Influence People. I had been associated with Dr. Robert Cialdini, now it's been more than 20 years, and was just enthralled by what we call the science of influence, or the psychology of persuasion. So much so that when I came in contact with that information more than 20 years ago, I knew it's what I would do with the rest of my career. And as I said, a little over 6 years ago, I left the insurance company to pursue this full time. And what I do now is I work with clients. I speak, train, coach, consult, and write about influence and how influence can have an impact to help you enjoy more professional success and personal happiness.
Beautiful, beautiful. I picked the word you knew in here. All right. And then that was something that happened 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And each of us will have opportunity arise in our life. And then, you know, we will know somewhere that is a turning point for our life, something important to our life. And a lot of, you know, I want to bring you to that moment when you realize that event that you met Dr. Robert, right? And you knew that this is going to be the new journey for you in the future. What happened into your thinking back then?
Well, let me share how I came to meet him.
Yes.
Because it's a unique situation, and one of those things that you don't know in the moment when you make a decision that's going to change the course of your career or life. You only know that by looking back. Mm-hmm. But there was a lady, and her name's Nancy, and I had lunch with Nancy yesterday, who worked with me, and she had been in my department, and she was studying for her master's at Ohio State University. She came down and she gave a video to my boss and I. I was in the sales department. I was doing a lot of sales training, and she gives this video of Dr. Cialdini presenting at Stanford. We watched the video, and for me, the light bulb came on. I immediately thought, holy cow, the psychology that he's talking about, it's the underpinning of all selling. It explains why certain approaches work and why certain approaches don't. So that appealed to me because I was doing the sales training. Second thing was everything he talked about was based on research. It wasn't fluff. It wasn't motivational hype. It wasn't like, look at what worked for me. You should do this. No, here's the data. And you could clearly see how different approaches positively impacted people's ability to ethically influence others. And the third thing that stood out was his stance on ethics. He was very clear about non-manipulative ways to move people to action. So I began to use that video around the company. I would show it, and we would talk about the concepts and how could we put them into practice. In the meantime, I signed up for Stanford's marketing. And they had a number of tremendous resources that we ordered over the years. But one day, one of their flyers came across my desk, and as I flipped through it, all of a sudden I saw Cialdini's picture, a big picture of him. And on top, it said in bold letters, bestseller. Right underneath it in bold letters, call it influence, persuasion, or even manipulation. And I thought, can't believe they actually use that word, manipulation. He's so clear about non-manipulative ways to move people to action. So here's the critical thing that happened that changed the course of my career. I sent an email to Stanford. I felt like that needed to be addressed. So I emailed Stanford and I basically said, I don't know anybody who wants to be manipulated, and I don't know anybody who's looking to become a manipulator. That word cannot be helping your sales, but it's probably really hurting. I never heard from Stanford, but sometime later, my phone rang at work, and it was a representative of Influence at Work, Robert Cialdini's company. Chris introduced herself and said, I'm calling on behalf of Dr. Cialdini to thank you. Because you send an email to Stanford, they're changing the marketing of all of our materials. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. So we had this nice conversation. And before we hung up, she said, if your company's ever looking for a guest speaker, Bob travels the world and talks about this. I said, you know what? I sit next to the woman who plans our events and books our speakers. Would you like to talk to her? And as fate would have it, it was the summer of 2004. Cialdini was in Columbus, Ohio 3 times to address the insurance agents that represented the company. I went through his 2-day workshop during that summer, and I just started to get the sense that we need to, as much as possible, bring his material into the company to help motivate our agents to sell our products, to get our employees to do the things that we need them to do. And once I got certified, and that was back in 2008, that's where I thought I can start actually doing things outside the company. I could speak and train and coach. And so that's where I got the idea that, hey, I think I want to do this with the rest of my career, and set up my website, LLC, all those things, and just began to work toward that, and ultimately left the company towards the end of 2018.
10 years after. 10 years after you got
Yeah.
certified. Wow.
Yeah. And I tell people you do need to have a sense of urgency, but you also don't have to just leave where you are right away. For me, working at the insurance company was like a proving ground. I was working with insurance agents. We could see if their sales were going up because they were putting into practice Cialdini's principles. I was tasked with helping to set up coaching. Well, we would integrate his principles into coaching. I ran the corporate university. I integrated the principles there. So I had an opportunity to continue to learn, so that when the time was right and I stepped away, I had all of this experience to fall back on and say, well, let me tell you how it worked in training, how it worked in sales, how it worked in coaching, and things like that. So it worked out perfectly for me.
Brian, for me to know you for a while, it seems to me that if I connect the dot backward, even before Nancy brought that piece of video to you, seems like you have been on that quest to look for something similar to that, didn't you?
It's interesting, when you look back on your career, boy, I do a lot of things differently, not radically differently, but I would certainly do things differently. I was involved with the sales training, and to be honest, the first 10 years in the industry, I thought sales was BS. I thought, you know what, people just want the lowest price. And as an underwriter, I had been beat down by agents on price. But then I came in contact with John Petrucci, and John ended up being my boss for most of my career. And I learned more in a year about selling from John than I had learned in my first 10 in the industry. And I began to realize you can do this ethically. And if you do it the right way, you can really help people by seeing the merits of your product or service that can genuinely benefit them. So that's where I started kind of getting my feet wet and recognizing I enjoy the sales aspect. I love learning, and I enjoy teaching. And so I was able to combine those things in the role that I had. But Cialdini's work took it to a whole different level. I was really fascinated by reading about the research, and my mind just was working in a way that I'd read something, I'm like, oh, I see how we could use that here at work. We're going to put this into practice. Some people, they're great coaches because they can see things about the game that others don't see. I felt like I was that way with influence and persuasion. I just began my eyes were opened. I saw opportunities everywhere, and I wanted to help people see those same opportunities and understand how to put it into practice.
Wow. And that is this conversation is designed. It's that piece of wisdom right there. I'm going to bring you to the moment that Nancy showed you that video. Okay, because that is where the Eureka moment happened, the light bulb happened into your head. Yeah. Okay, so probably many other people have watched that video also, right? It's not you the first one. Many other people also watched that video. So at that moment, what triggered into your head that say, okay, this is the one?
Well, I think it goes back to the three things that first of all, I understood clearly that as I listened to him, this psychology could really help explain how to go about selling better. And then the logical, I'm a logical or analytical person when you look at personality types. So the research and the data really appealed to me. That gave me confidence, like I can get out here and really get behind this, because I can point people to solid evidence that in putting this into practice works. And then that third thing about his non-manipulative, I like to think of myself as a good person, as a moral person, as somebody who tries to do right by other people. And I knew that manipulation is not doing right by other people. And so it was, I guess, the combination of those three things that really had that light bulb coming on for me to get so excited about it. You know, other people could watch it and maybe they're not in sales. And so the psychology is interesting, but doesn't resonate the way that it did with me. Some other people maybe more emotional, may find research a little bit boring. And then there are some people who don't care either way when it comes to the ethics of something, or they don't care deeply. But for me, it hit on all three deeply. And that is what drew me, into it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you did another amazing thing that leading to your journey and encounter with Dr. Cialdini. You spoke up when you saw that flyer saying the manipulations, right? So if you can trace back into your childhood and up until now, where did that speaking up ability coming from inside of you?
You know, we talked in the past about my father served in the Marines, and for all of his shortcomings, he did very much instill in me, and my mom too, a very clear sense of right and wrong. And even though he may not have lived up to all those ideals, I think he tried hard to instill them in me. And so one of those was lying. You don't lie. And it's funny that even going back into my childhood, my mom would laugh like, you know, you could never lie. If something happened, you would start asking me questions, so I would ask you and you could confess. Or so there was just something deeply ingrained in me about doing my best to do things the right way and to not be afraid to speak up when you don't agree with something. And I'm certainly not a contentious person. I don't have to speak my mind on every issue. But I felt very strongly about that because I saw a genuineness in Dr. Cialdini, in his path of doing this ethically. And for something to be so blatant, to be an advertisement using the word manipulation, I just knew that wasn't right. And so I felt I needed to speak up and at least address the situation. I couldn't control the outcome, but I could feel good that, hey, I tried to address this situation.
Beautiful, beautiful. I know the next question is not going to have an exact answer or the correct answer. But if I want you to give weight in terms of percentage between the genetic makeup for you to have it and the way the environment that having that you raise up have you to have that personality. So what percentage you will give it to your nature and what percentage is your nurture?
So you're asking about nature and nurture and
yes. Just guess.
Yeah. I want to say 50-50, but that's just kind of it could be an easy cop out because it's right down the middle. I think the majority would be the nurture part, I think, because I just really think that parents have a much stronger influence on their children than they realize. It's so easy to say like, oh, they're teenagers, you can't even talk to them. No, you still have a huge amount of impact on them, even if in my case, my dad wasn't always in the house, but I knew I was trying to live up to expectations and things that he had for me. So I would say the majority, I'll say 75%, probably on the nurture side in terms of how I was raised. My mom was always really good about being very open and honest. Any question I asked her, any question, she would do her best to honestly answer it. So kind of grew up in an environment where there was freedom of communication. And I very much tried to pass that along to our daughter, that nothing was off limits. So that would be my answer. 25% genetic, 75% environmental.
Thank you very much for that answer. And the topic, since we're gonna ask one last question on that one before we move to the topic of wisdom. Okay, so
Okay.
If the office of Dr. Cialdini didn't never call you, how would you feel about it?
I didn't expect a call, so I wouldn't have been disappointed or felt bad. But I can tell you that looking back, I had an opportunity last May. There was a conference called Influence Amplified. It was a celebration of the 40th anniversary of Dr. Cialdini coming out with his book, Influence. And I had a chance. I was the first keynote speaker at the event, and he's in the front row. And I might even get a little emotional when I say this now, but I turned to him and I said, I have to thank you because you not only changed the course of my career, but you changed the course of my life. Because obviously my career has been colored by this, and it's what I do now. But how I interact with my wife, how we interacted with and raised our daughter, how I communicate with my friends, all of these people, these relationships are better because of Dr. Cialdini's work and what I have learned from him. So not only is my life positively impacted, I believe that all the people I come in contact with are positively impacted because of what his work has done for me. And that's the biggest compliment I could ever give him. So if I hadn't heard from his office, wow, what a loss it would have been for me and for all these people that I have known over the years.
Wow. So in your life, you have a chance to meet that wise man, and of course many other people with great wisdom in their lives, right? So how, in your own definition, you're going to define wisdom for our audience?
I'm a pretty simple person. I like to, if you were to see me present, I keep my slides simple. I want there to be a simplicity to the message. I think it was Einstein who said, keep everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. And I think a very simple definition for wisdom is the application of knowledge. When I speak to an audience and I share about these principles of influence, everybody gets it because you're describing how human beings typically think and behave. And therefore people can go, oh yeah, that's how the salesperson got me to buy. Or, oh, now I understand why people respond to me positively the way that they do. But it's not the knowing, it's the doing. Anybody can hold that information in their head, but how do you put that into practice to positively impact yourself and others? That's, I think, where wisdom comes in. And that's challenging because knowing and doing are two different things.
Beautiful. So I will split the answer into two parts, right? One is the application, which is the doing, and the other one is the knowledge, which is what we have in, right? Then what the knowings. So before we have the doings, we have to have the knowing. And in the world of so many noises nowadays, with so many choices, so much of information, so it's easily for us to be information overloaded, and knowledge become a mess if we don't know how to filter it, if we don't know how to select what is good for us. So in your opinion, where can we find the knowledge that can help us to get older and wiser?
Well, I think once people come in contact with the principles, and there's only 7 of them, once they come in contact with it, they begin to notice it. So for example, I use this with audiences all the time. I'll say, how many of you have bought a new car in the last couple of years? And hands go up. And then I'll say, let me know if your experience was like mine. When I bought my new car several years ago and I drove off the lot, I felt like one of the most popular guys in the whole city because I felt like I saw my car everywhere. right? There's my car. There's my car. There. And people laugh and they all nod like, yeah, I had that experience too. The reality is the car I'm driving, there were really no more of them on the roads the day after I bought my car versus the day before. But something was raised to awareness, right? My car. And if we can put these principles out in front of people and raise the awareness, then all of a sudden they start going like, oh, I clearly recognize how the salesperson's trying to get me to buy, or the marketer is trying to get me to the store, or the politician's trying to get me to vote for him or her. They start to clearly see and understand psychologically what is happening. The bigger thing for them, though, is to understand then how to utilize that ethically so that they can have more people saying yes. They can enjoy the success and the happiness that comes with that. So it's kind of a three level. It's like you learn the principles, then you begin to see the principles, then you begin to apply the principles. And the only way that happens, though, is having the good fortune of maybe attending a keynote that I would give, or going through training, or somebody just decides to read one of Cialdini's books. And all of a sudden, it's raised a little bit to awareness. And as they start looking for it, they'll start finding it more and more.
Wow. So by the books from Dr. Cialdini, and they are attending the speaking engagement that you are giving. So when is the next one that you are going to give your speech?
Let's see. I was just in New Jersey a few weeks ago and spoke with 36 insurance agents. I spent a half a day with them. I'm having a brain fart where I can't think. My focus right now is in 3 weeks. My wife and I are going to Europe for a couple of weeks. That's where all of my thought is right now. But I've got some summer engagements. Like most of the people I talk to are insurance related, because that's where I spent 30 plus years. That's where I do all my marketing, is really towards insurance companies, insurance agencies, and associations that interact with them. And so I'm constantly speaking at either speaking at events like a conference, or going in and doing like half day or single day or multi-day training for insurance agents, helping them to understand these principles, but then specifically, how do you put it into practice to help your business?
Mm-hmm. So if they want to get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Two things would be connect with me on LinkedIn. As you know, I post a lot of content. When somebody connects with me, every person I send a personal message to, so there's some opportunity for some back and forth there. All of my contact information is out there too, my phone number, my email, etc. And then the other would be my website, which is influencepeople.biz. Lots of information out there, lots of easy ways. Click on a button, we'll set up a 15-minute phone call. So those would be the two best ways.
Wow. Wonderful. Let's continue with the wisdom discussions, okay? So we know the knowledge at the moment already, and you say now go to the application. And when you say that, first is you learn the principle, you see the principle, then you apply the principle. But it sounds pretty simple. In reality, it's not that easy, right? Yeah. So what is some tips that you can give to us that we can start to put the knowledge into action without hesitations?
Well, one of the biggest things I tell, especially salespeople, is you always learn from your wins and losses. If you lose, you've put in effort, you've put out a proposal, you don't get it. What can you learn from that? Will you have your prospective client give you 15 minutes so that you can find out, hey, what went into your decision? Is there anything I could have done differently? And that is not a time to try to convince them or persuade them. It's for you to learn, and just putting it out as, I would love to learn so that I can be better the next time I have an opportunity with anybody. But even the wins, you learn from those too. Okay, what did I do that set me apart from the competition, right? So this is part of the building, I think, of the wisdom. We learn it, we see it, we start putting it into practice, and we will have failures. We all do. What can we learn from those failures that can make us a little better the next time, so that the failures become less and less and the successes become more and more. And I think this is important because there are people who go about the influence process the wrong way, and yet they have success. And we would not be wise to try to emulate some of those things that they do. But those people who have success could be a little bit deceived in thinking they're doing everything right, when in reality, they plain got lucky for some reason. As my friend said yesterday when we had lunch, she likes to play tennis. Sometimes you hit a weird shot that lands in the right place and you get the point. But you don't want to try to keep doing that. You got lucky. If you try to build your game on that, you're not going to have much game. So understanding these principles and the nuances and putting them into practice is very, very important. And a lot of people they understand at a high level what these principles are, but how to activate them, how to amplify and make them stronger, those are the things that most people don't understand. And those can be the real difference maker.
So what baby steps should they take today if they want to get into that stage?
The baby step, I think, would be taking one principle, really beginning to learn about that principle, finding out how to put that into practice, and then start seeing what kind of difference it makes. When you have success, that tends to breed in us a desire to have more success. Like, oh, wow, I tried that thing Brian said and it worked. Where else can I apply it? Right? And you have some more success, and then you say, well, this stuff's great. I want to learn more about these. So I go to another principle. An example I will give your audience would be, we all understand the principle of liking, which simply says it's easier for people to say yes to us if they like us, right? None of us picks up the phone on a Friday to call somebody we don't like to go to dinner or a movie, right? We call the people we like because we enjoy being around them. So everybody gets this, but what most people don't understand about this principle, it's never about you trying to get somebody to like you. It's about me coming to know and like you. Right? That subtle difference, the same things will cause you to like me that also cause me to like you. If we find we have something in common, like grew up in the same town, went to the same university, have the same pet, whatever, those things will cause you to like me, but they also cause me to like you. And if I change my mindset to say, I want to get to know and like the people that I am working with, the clients I support, the vendors I deal with, I want to get to know and like them. People pick up on that. The subtle cues, the looks in the eye, the tone of voice, smile on the face, all these things. And when you believe that somebody truly likes you, that's what opens you up to whatever they might be asking or suggesting. Because most of us believe deep down that friends do right by friends, right? So the subtlety of this principle is, don't go out and try to get everybody to like you. Take it and say, I want to come to like the people that I'm with. And I tell you what, it will make a world of difference in terms of your relationships. And some of those relationships may be business relationships that blossom into client relationships. But it really starts with that mindset. And so all of these principles have these subtle nuances that as people begin to go deeper and deeper and deeper, they start to recognize there are ways to put this into practice that are completely different than what most people do.
So you said there are 7 principles, right? Where can we find those information about the 7 principles? What's the name for them?
We call them the principles of influence or principles of persuasion. Dr. Cialdini's books talk about those. My books talk about all of the principles and how to put them into practice.
Wow. If you can pick one additional principle that you live by every day, what would that principle is, Brian?
It's interesting that people ask the question like, well, which one's the most powerful principle? Quite often it's the situation you're in that dictates that, or the personality type that you're dealing with that may dictate that. But I will go to reciprocity. So reciprocity is the natural obligation we feel to give back to somebody who was first given to us, right? When we raise our children, we teach them this very early on. Someone does something kind and we bend down and we say, what do you say? And our children will look up and say, thank you, right? And so they're learning like, oh, somebody did something. I'm supposed to do something, I'm supposed to give thanks. I'm supposed to maybe write a letter or send a card, but I'm supposed to do something. So according to social scientists, every human society on the planet raises its people in the way of reciprocity. Unfortunately, sometimes people have a give to get mentality. I'll help you if you'll help me, or I'm doing this for you, but there are strings attached. If we lay hold of the principle of liking the right way, where I come to know and like you, then my giving becomes authentic because I want my friends to succeed. I want to see my friends happy. Now, I also understand that if they're enjoying more success and happiness and I'm a part of it, they're going to naturally want to help me when I need it. And so by helping enough other people, according to Zig Ziglar, you help enough other people get what they want, then you can get everything you want in life. Not because you have to, manipulate or pull levers or whatever. People whom you help and they enjoy success and happiness naturally want to help you have success and happiness too. So those two principles together become extremely powerful when we put them into practice the right way.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you mentioned that pick one and practice it. See the result of that. And enjoy the little wins that, success will breed for more success, right? And it seems like in this world, with so many noise and distraction, people don't tend to be focusing on just the small number of one, but they tend to have many, many things to do at once. And that's probably the things that derail them from, getting to the better result that they could have had, right? So how could we, what should you advise to them to rethink about that practice though?
Yeah, we do live in an information overloaded society. But here's a reality. It's only going to get more overloaded.
Yeah.
2 years, 5 years from now, we're going to look back on 2025 and say the good old days when things were moving at a slower pace, even though it's the fastest pace that we've ever been in. A lot of what I'm talking about doesn't take a tremendous amount of time. It just takes a little bit of focused effort. So for example, you're going to have a Zoom meeting with somebody, go out and look at their LinkedIn profile, 15 minutes before your meeting and try to identify some things that you have in common. If you don't find something that you have in common, could you at least ask them about something that you clearly know is of interest to them? Because people tend to feel good when you ask about things that are important to them. And you did that very naturally as soon as we got on this call today, asking me about my grandson. Well, of course, I love him. And as I talk about him, I have all these good feelings, and you get to be the recipient of those feelings, right? I begin to associate you closely with those feelings. So we can talk about what we have in common, or we can ask about what we know is important. And either way, we start to get that benefit of that person connecting with us. I'll give you a quick example. I had an opportunity to meet with a senior vice president at a large insurance company here in Columbus. It's called Nationwide. And she was giving me 30 minutes of her time. I noticed on her LinkedIn page that she was connected to the individual who was my high school football coach. So during the meeting, I said, hey, before we get too far, I want to make sure I ask you, how do you know Todd Alice? She says, oh, he's my best friend forever at church, and we're on this committee. And she's going on and on about how special he is. She's like, how do you know him? I said, I played high school football for him. I said, it was a long time ago, but we are still in touch, and he's had a huge impact on my life. So we bond around this person who means so much to both of us. So here's this busy executive, and she makes a phone call to give me another like 15 minutes or 20 minutes of her time, just because we're talking about this. So that's how it works, right? We find things that we have in common. We start talking about those, and the earlier we do it, the better, because then we start to reap the benefits of the natural liking that occurs. It wouldn't have been as effective for me to have done that at the very end of the meeting. So I usually try to early on say, hey, before we get started, how do you know so-and-so? Or I saw you did this, or what about that? And we just naturally get into this conversation that really sets a different and a better tone for the rest of the conversation.
Beautiful. Thank you for that very beautiful words of advice. Is because it will help people to see how the importance of being relational to other people, the likability of human touch is very important, right? Brian, you met a lot of wise people in your career, in your life, and what do they have in common?
In my case, with my close friend circle, I think the wisest people I know have a very strong foundation in God. I'm thinking of my friend that we'll be going to Europe with, Judd. I think of my wife. I mean, she's extremely wise. Our daughter, her name is Abigail. We named her after, in the Bible, one of King David's wives, and she was considered virtuous, beautiful, and wise. And just seeing the decisions that she makes in life. But I think the common thread among all these people that are coming right to mind is a foundation of faith, that they're not looking within themselves for wisdom, they're looking up for wisdom.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And what don't they do to keep them on that path of getting older and wiser?
What do they do?
What do they don't do?
What don't they do?
What don't they do? Yes.
Yeah. I don't think any of them let themselves get swept up in all of the things that are going on in the world. Now, here in our country right now, there's never been a time like it in our lifetime. All the changes that are happening with the government and the impact around the world, and there is so much. You could just watch the news 24 hours a day and still not be able to take it all in. And making a conscious choice to try to steer clear of that, because for the most part, all that stuff's outside of like my control, my friend's control, my wife's control. And it will just produce a lot of unnecessary angst and anxiety, worry, and things like that. That's not to say that I never watch the news, but I do not focus on it like so many other people. I may glance at some headlines, but I do not sit down with cable news on the television all the time. I consciously make choices to watch documentaries and other things that will be more uplifting or add to my knowledge rather than add to my worry and anxiety.
Beautiful. You mentioned the word making conscious choices, right? Mm-hmm. And then for those conscious choices to happen, then you have to have clarity. So in life, what did you do? What have you been doing to help you to have that clarity in life?
For me, one of the best activities I ever undertook was shortly after reading Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I took one step that has impacted my life ever since, and that was in his chapter, Begin with the End in Mind, he talked about writing a personal mission statement. He said, companies have mission statements, they're North Star to guide them, but most people never have anything like that. They just live paycheck to paycheck or vacation to vacation. So I sat down, and that was more than 30 years ago, and I wrote the personal mission statement. And then I would have it pop up on a task every day, Monday through Friday at work, one section of it to read. Now, every morning, as soon as I get up, and I go downstairs. I have it on an app that I can listen to. And I think that just listening to it or reading it almost every single day for more than 30 years, it just seeps into your soul. And for me, the opening statement is that when I die, my goal is I want to hear God say, well done. Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful with a few things. I'm going to put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And I don't do that in I'm working my way to heaven or I'm earning anything. No, I just want to be pleasing to God like I would want to be pleasing to my wife or to my daughter. I don't have to earn anything from any of them, and I don't have to earn anything from God. But in gratitude to how he's changed my life, I want to be pleasing to him. So that opening statement, and then I go in and I talk about my faith, family, personal well-being, career. But that is like my North Star.
Bring me back to that morning 30 years ago when you wrote that personal statement, because that's very important for people to be able to have their own personal statement also in their lives, right, Brian? Help us to share back, what did you do on that morning for you to come up with that personal statement yourself?
You're testing my memory. 30 years ago, I don't know that I remember the exact things, but I do know this, that my wife and I, we were going through marital issues. Everybody, if you stay together long enough, you're going to have issues that you're dealing with. And we were dealing with some really significant issues. And so reading that book, I was trying to, get some stability, I guess. And as I read that about the mission statement, it made sense. And I was convicted that, I was one of those people, kind of living day to day, trying to be a good person, trying to do, right things, but didn't have something that I was working toward. And so I thought, if I can come close to being the person that I lay out here, that will not only benefit me, it will benefit my wife and our relationship. And then eventually our daughter came along and it's had benefit for her as well. So I think that's really what the catalyst was, there were just some hard issues going on. And I felt like this could probably help me in dealing with those.
Beautiful. Last question for this conversation, okay? You mentioned about the word think, and I want to pick your brain on thinking, because we want to help people to grow their ability to think themselves. So, Brian, how have you been growing that ability to think for you?
One of the things that I do, I journal, not every day, but almost every morning. I'm up very early. I'm usually out the door before 5 a.m. to either take a long walk or a walk and then run. And when I'm walking, if thoughts hit me, I pull out my phone and I voice text into a Google Doc. And it's become like my journal. Whatever it is, if I'm struggling, with some thoughts about a situation, if it's about something going on in society, my relationship with my wife, whatever it is, I will just voice text that in there. And then when I get back in the house, I'll kind of clean it up and throw it in the date order. And that helps me clarify my thinking a lot. Mm-hmm. I've been doing this now for a long time. I mean, it's almost 500 typed pages of thoughts about everything. Now, one of the interesting things that I do to help in terms of my thoughts also, because I don't necessarily remember exactly what I wrote 3 years ago. I can go back and look, but I'm trying to get creative with AI. And so I've used ChatGPT, where I would take that like 500-page document and drop it in, and I would say, summarize my thoughts around this topic or this relationship, or how do you see me in terms of, and I would ask it questions. And it's fascinating what it comes back with. Sometimes suggestions on things I could do to maybe improve a situation or relationship or something like that. But it's like conversing with somebody who never forgets because it has my written words from 3.5 years ago to draw from, to say, well, Brian, here's a summary of your thoughts based on. So that also I feel like helps me to clarify my thinking, because I can synthesize a lot of information in one small space to really start wrapping my mind around a topic.
Beautiful. Wow. Thank you very much for sharing that. I when I am on my jogging time and I listen to TED Talks and stuff like that, or sometimes I listen to conversation I had with the people that I interview, right? And when the idea came, I text myself also, and I read a lot about the attention. So focus on one thing at a time, and a lot of advice is if you walk in, then walk in. Don't do it. So I got confused. What you share with me now gave me the courage to continue doing what I've been doing.
Good.
The last question is, if 20 something years from now and you had a chance to talk about a big conversation, a wise conversation you could with Emmett James, your grandchild, okay? So what would be that one advice 20 years later you're going to tell him?
It's interesting you asked this. I was given, it was called a grandfather's journal, to write down things about when I grew up, when Abigail, Emmett's mom, when she was growing up, and all of this stuff. And I flipped through it and I thought, I'm not going to write this stuff down. But what I did was I sat in front of my computer and I recorded like 22, 23 videos that are about 15 minutes each, answering different questions that were prompted by the book. And some of those were like life wisdom. And so I'll say two things. 20 years from now, the wisdom I would give him would be dictated by who he is and what his goals are, what his struggles are, and things like that. So I don't know that I could say that's the wisdom I'd want to give him. But I do remember saying, the wisdom I would want to convey to you right now is to first and foremost understand that God exists and he loves you, and that if you give yourself to him, you will never regret that decision. No matter how much you give, you will be given more in return. And I'm not talking finances or anything like that. I'm talking about growing as a human being in your heart and soul, and to know that your parents love you deeply. Kids can grow up and not really think about that stuff, but the amount of love and attention and things, I think if Emmett grows up and knows God loves me, my parents love me, everything else can be handled after that.
Wow. So the basic is all on love, right?
Yeah, because I think when people don't feel loved, they don't feel valued, right? That's where they're going to go look for it somewhere else. And unfortunately, people look for it in a lot of places that are not good. And to grow up secure, and I am so thankful that our daughter, a couple of years ago, we were out and about walking around, and her husband Tyler was off doing something, and we were sitting in front of our house, and she just told my wife and I how much she loved her life. She goes, I love my life, and I know God loves me, and I'm just thankful. I mean, it was the best thing I could hear as a parent. We didn't do everything perfectly, but she turned out pretty darn good, and she recognized how much we have sown into her, and now hopefully she'll get to do the same for her son and other children that they may have.
Wow. Brian, I feel like every conversation that we had, the level of that keep increasing, and there's so many wisdom in this conversation, so many things that I think for a lot of people, when they listen to, have time to reflect and think and make change in their life for something that matters. And I really appreciate you spending time joining our program and share a lot of beautiful advices in this conversation. We love you. We love your family. And when you meet Emmett James this afternoon, please give him a big hug and kiss for us, okay? And Abigail, of course.
Yeah, it was wonderful talking to you again. I'm happy to join you anytime you want to have a conversation.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, my friend.